Hey everyone, guess who's back? It's the commish back here with another team preview. This time it's Mother's Day, and we got Dusan, Subotica Spartans, a guy that hails from Serbia. Definitely adds an international presence to us out west. I myself personally have never been to Serbia, and I would imagine that most of us here in the league maybe have not. So it is really cool to have Dusan all the way from Serbia in this league with Subotica Spartans and a guy that has had success in this league. A lot of the times I noticed Deshaun is finishing, top three, whether it be, the old LOC or maybe the potential new Waffle or even here in the LOD. So it's an absolute pleasure to have him. He's a good communicator and very active. So definitely a great fit for the league. Just going to share my screen now and get into Dusan's preview. And we'll go into this PowerPoint presentation here of Dusan. So draft has been held. And, when I look at the offensive rankings here in LOD, Dusan, I'm going to give you 10th place. So that's in the bottom half of the league. So I'm sure that's obviously not the place you want to be. It's not ideal for sure. But that's where I have you as 10th. When we break it down and we look at quarterbacks, well, this is where things probably are a little bit challenging for you, and they are. I got you 10th. Kirk Cousins might be his last year in mini, but he does have Justin Jefferson and a new weapon in Jordan Addison now. I think that's a big improvement there in Minnesota. And they could, don't forget they got TJ Hawkinson last year too. So that's a pretty dynamic offense. And then I thought you did a smart thing in the draft. This is where, again, want to look back at the draft too and see what kind of moves you made. And there you see we got Ryan Tannehill, and you were smart to know in the second round. You're like, well, I'm going to need a quarterback as Cousins. Could be last year. Ryan Tannehill, obviously you picked him up in the waiver wire, but you had drafted Will Levis after trading me, Sam Darnold, and Malik Willis, obviously not working out. So I thought it was smart what you did in the draft, but definitely still see you at 10th. The only reason I gave you 10th is because of Kirk Cousins throwing to Justin Jefferson. There's going to be a lot of volume there, yards, touchdowns, and the fact that I thought you did well in the draft with Will Levis in round 2 because that's all that was left. And then also going with Ryan Tannehill and waivers. So 10th place, those where I have you bottom half for sure. Running backs, this is where I also see challenges for you. I have you placed 10th. So, your power ranking for offense is 10th, and we start out with quarterbacks and running backs, and you're at 10th. So here's the problems. Alvin Kamara definitely facing the suspension, and he didn't look that great last year. So Alvin Kamara's game, the way he's shifty, pass catcher out of the backfield, those guys do seem to lose some spark though as they get older. And Alvin Kamara now with the legal issues, definitely tough to have him in the stable as your top guy, right? AJ Dillon, here's a guy that was supposed to come in as this heavy bruiser and a compliment to Aaron Jones. Still hasn't come to fruition, really, if you ask me. He's entering his third year now, so we'll see if that changes, but it still hasn't come to fruition. Ty Chandler, nobody's talking about this guy, but maybe he will have a role in Minnesota if Dalvin Cook goes. That's a big if now, basically on the stuff that I've been reading now that they've been able to move on from Zadarius Smith. It sounds like they might be able to hang on to Cook with that cap and his cap hit. Kendry Miller, so again, I thought you did fairly smart here in the draft. You drafted for need, I think, though, right? Because obviously, you were looking at Alvin Kamara's situation, 7th overall, pulled the trigger on Kendry Miller. Definitely pretty early to go with him. But again, he could be the starter. So it might not be too early, right? And then I also like the fact he picked up a couple of other rookie running backs, Chris Rodriguez in Washington, and then Eric Gray in New York. Both these guys, I'm curious to see how they perform. I've read some pretty decent reports on these guys. And I don't think any job is safe in the NFL. What if a guy like Eric Gray could come in and blow the doors off, in New York? Do you think they're going to want to sign Saquon long term? So I still see at 10th still because of the issues with AK and obviously the uncertainties. Even though rookie running backs, I can see why you have them, but there's still a lot of uncertainties there with those rookie running backs. They're not Bijan Robinson, so you are at 10th place. Wide receivers. Well, guess what? So we got a theme here going on with your preview. 10th again, this time for the wide receiver room. And, here's why. I mean, I guess you could argue, they've been arguing it all off season that Kadarius Toney will be the WR1 in Kansas City. I mean, the guy hasn't played more than a full game, has he? I mean, I don't know how you can say he's going to be the WR1 with that injury history. I mean, he could be explosive in that offense, maybe if he could stay healthy. But maybe that's your true WR1. I think Darnell Mooney's role is actually going to reduce a fair amount there in Chicago with DJ Moore showing up. I think Mooney could be on the way out there, actually, to be honest with you, after this year. Who knows? Brandon Ayuk, again, he's more of a complement piece to Debo there in San Francisco, and we don't know who's throwing the ball. Allen Robinson, you traded me earlier in the offseason for Sam Darnold. Then he went to Pittsburgh, so might turn out to be actually a pretty good move for you. Sky Moore, he's in year 2. We'll see what he can do. Van Jefferson, I think that offense with the Rams is starting to reduce a little bit. Stafford, the injury problems. Sterling Shepard, guy just tore either ACL. I think it was the ACL. He's, I think, on the wrong side of 32. So we'll see where he fits in now in that Giants offense. Devontae Parker, Jarvis Landry. Again, these are guys that, their names, but they do have question marks. And again, when I look at this wide receiving core, there's nobody there that I think is going to scare another opposing team consistently on a week over week basis at all. Maybe Toney, if he can break out, or if injuries happen, of course. But obviously they will. Some of them they're gonna put up points, right? There's no doubt about you're gonna get points from these guys, but it's just not gonna be electrifying on a weekly basis, in my opinion. Next up, tight end, and this is where I gave you 5th. So a lot of people might be like, what, 5th? How do you only give him 5th with Catching Kelsey there? I mean, let's face it, Catching Kelsey is a phenom in the tight end position. He is going to be Mahomes' favorite target again, and maybe you could be higher than top 5. There's no doubt about that. But Catching Kelsey is definitely getting old. I think he's nearing the end. And then you also have Taysom Hill. The issue I kind of gave you 5th here is Hill is battling Jawan Johnson and now Foster Moreau showing up there in New Orleans. So, there's some competition there. Is Taysom Hill really, the Swiss Army knife? I don't know. Who knows, right? Guy could be electric, though, and that's where my ranking of 5th could be dead wrong. Maybe it should be higher. Austin Hooper there in Vegas. Maybe he'll hold the reins for a bit until Michael Mayer is ready. But obviously, the Raiders didn't think that Hooper is going to be this end-all, be-all. Otherwise, they wouldn't have drafted Michael Mayer. And then you obviously went with the rookie strain. So you could be higher in 5th. I could be wrong on this one. Catching Kelsey, I think, is a great player. But overall, power ranking of 10th on the offensive side, 5th here for tight ends. And, I think there's some improvements you can make to your overall top talent. I think you have great depth on offense, but the top talent, I think, is a little weak. Defense, this is where I gave you 6th. So you're in the top half of the league on the defensive side of the ball. I think you know your IDPs by the way I can see the way your roster's been set up here. Getting into it, looking at DLLB, and Wosu did really well for Seattle last year. And then you have Carl Loftus and Anudike Izuma for Kansas City. Those are the pass rushers there for Kansas City. So you got that area covered, which I think is pretty smart because, again, Kansas City's defending Super Bowl champs, right? So they're in a lot of primetime games. Usually that's when you see big plays show up. Exciting plays is when a team's playing those primetime games. So it's a decent group. I ain't going to say it's a stellar group by any means. There's definitely been better ones that we've previewed so far. But this is where I think your defense gets really good. And that's when I would look at your MLPs. All right. So Jordan Brooks, yeah, I know he has a torn ACL, but he was putting up huge fantasy numbers when he was healthy. And he will be back, right? Logan Wilson, he's good. Tremaine Edmonds, new surroundings in Chicago. We'll see what he's going to be obviously looking to prove himself. Brian Asamoah right now looks like he is going to be the starting middle linebacker in Minnesota. We'll have to see what happens in camp. But right now, that's the verdict. Ernest Jones, same thing in LA. He is the guy getting the tackles. And then David Long, too, as well, is another guy that I'll mention with this group that can also put up big numbers in new surroundings there in Miami. So it's going to be interesting to see how these guys can perform. But I think it's a great group for sure, no doubt about it. And then when you look at the DBs, I'm continuedly impressed when I look at some of these guys. Petrie, what a year he had last year. Hufanga, same thing. And then you throw in the fact you got Dax Hill, Jaron Curse, Ryan Neal in new surroundings in Tampa Bay. It looks like he'll be the guy there. Obviously, he was putting up big numbers for Seattle last year, a waiver wire ad last year for Seattle. And again, it just goes to show how IDPs can change. And then you also drafted Mapu, who could have a role from what I'm hearing. So your defense to me looks rock solid. And, there's not too many defenses that I see that are much better. Obviously, I only picked 5 defenses to be better. And I'm curious as I go through these previews, I'd like to go back and see if they are better than what you have put together here. But I think really your DLLBs are not as strong as some of the teams that are going to be ahead of you, obviously, as Carl Aftis and obviously Felix are still young. Same with Arnold and Browning, really, too. So a lot of unproven talent there. But the MLBs look strong, DBs look strong. So all right, so Dushan, just to really end your preview here and talk about your outlook. I have you right on the cusp. I have you middle of the road here in terms of talent level or a power ranking in the league. So I think ultimately you could be a playoff team. I think you're going to be right on the fringe. I think you have some tough opponents there in your division. Adrian seems to be won that division consistently, it seems a lot. And also new owner, Garbage Time Gamblers. And Tracy looks like they're going to be pretty strong as well. So I think it'll be, and even Milan too. So I think it's going to be interesting. Your draft outlook, you don't trade your draft picks much. You just have your draft picks for next year. And again, I think ultimately you just got to try to hit on some of those draft picks and find that top end talent that I just feel is slightly missing on your team compared to the other ones that I feel are titled contenders. Good luck this year, Dusan.